All right, let's continue checking out table 3, okay, which tells us or which demonstrates the gains from trade. Okay. Here, the goal for us is to show that because of the trade between the two countries, things becomes cheaper. Okay, and our common sense would say that the cheaper the better. Okay, for our given income. Okay, now the first thing we need to figure out is a comparative advantage, okay, for both countries. Now, to do this, we have to go back to table 2. Okay, in table 2, when we calculate these ratios to figure out opportunity cost, we actually make the comparison between the two industries within each country. Okay, so for example, when we calculate the opportunity cost per corn in England, we compare the corn with the sweaters, right? In England, that's how we get this ratio: 12 sweaters divided by 4 corns. Okay, and for Portugal, we also compare that, between the two countries. Okay, now in table 3, what we're going to do is building upon the previous answers, we are going to compare between the two countries, okay, and see which country has a lower opportunity cost in what product or what good. Okay, now in England, and let's take a look at this, or we can compare, the corn, the opportunity cost of each corn between the two countries. Okay. Now in England, to produce 1 corn, it has to give up 3 sweaters. But in Portugal, they only need to give up 2/3 sweaters. And because this is smaller than 3 sweaters, so we find that Portugal has a lower opportunity cost of producing corn, because it potentially lose fewer units of sweaters. Okay, so let's put it here. We find that Portugal has a comparative advantage in corn production. Okay, let's look at sweater. To produce each sweater, England has to give up 1/3 corns, but Portugal has to give up 3/2, so it's 1.5 units of corn. So England gives up less amount of corn to be able to produce 1 sweater. That means it has the comparative advantage in sweater production. Okay, so here we already find the comparative advantage for both countries. Okay. Let me say this one more time. When we go back to part A, we find that England has absolute advantage in both goods. However, in table 3, we show that it has only the comparative advantage in sweater production. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, from the consequence we already got, the outcome we already got, you can also tell the difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Okay, that's why we said that a country could have no absolute advantage at all, but it must have a comparative advantage. Okay, so in this case, we're talking about Portugal. Okay, because the comparative advantage, once again, is built upon the comparison within the country between the two industries or two goods. Okay. Now, the second thing we need to figure out is the pre-trade price. Okay, in both countries, you could say pre-trade or you could say without trade. Okay, so if both countries are isolated, what we find is let's say in England, okay, because it let's say if it produces 1 sweater, okay, it should be able to exchange 1/3 of corn again, go back to table 2. Okay, you would be able to find that here, right? So let me write it this way. So if you have one sweater in England, okay, without trade, the trade with Portugal, you can get 1/3 corms, okay, with other English people or other English farmers producing corn. Okay, so we're still using this ratio back in table 2. Okay, now remember here the price is expressed in the relative term. In other words, it's always, how expensive or how cheap sweater is always relative or expressed in the units of the other good. Okay, so we don't have any dollar amount here. Okay, again, this is because, as I said many times, that in the first half of this course, we would like to focus on the real economy. Okay, the real economy, so you don't have to worry about the monetary things. All right, now let's look at the Portugal. Portugal, if you have one sweater, okay, you would be able to exchange here again 3/2 or I think here, it should be here, sorry, 3/2 units of corn, right, or 1.5 corms. Okay, now these are the prices in each country without trade, or they are isolated from each other. Okay, now suppose they are trading. Okay, when they are trading with each other, you would find that the price is going to be the same between the two countries. Okay, why it's the same? Because if you find, for example, the sweater is more expensive in England than it is in Portugal, you would find the businessmen would like to buy sweaters in Portugal, buy it now, and ship it to England and sell it high to make a profit. Okay, and vice versa, if they find the corns are more expensive in England than it is in Portugal, the businessmen would buy corn in Portugal, ship them to England, and sell them high. So when in England we find a more or higher amount of corns supplied, the price tend to go down, right? And when we ship the corns out of Portugal, we find the quantity supplied of corn would go down. Would go down, so the price will go up. Okay, and eventually we find that corn price in England started going down, and the corn price in Portugal started going up. Eventually, they're gonna meet somewhere in the middle, right? So that's why we said with free trade, there should be only one price between the two countries. Okay, or another way you can think about this is once they start trading, it becomes one market, right? It's called global market. So one market, one price. Okay. Now, how could we find this trading price? Here is a trick. Okay. Now, if you go back and look at the pre-trade price, we find that one sweater equals 1/3 corm in England, but one sweater equals 3/2 corms in Portugal. So the trading price would be somewhere in between. Okay, it will be somewhere in between. In reality, many other factors, like the labor productivity and the shipping cost and taste and preferences in both countries, all of these factors will determine where exactly the trading price would be. Okay, but we know for sure it's going to falling into this range. Okay, so it's going to be greater than 1/3, but less than 3/2. Okay, now in this case, to be able to proceed, we just arbitrarily pick one value in between. So let's say one sweater equals one corn. Okay, so this way, I think it will be pretty easy for us to do the math. Okay, we want to reduce the math challenges to the minimum level. Okay, again, one sweater equals one quorum. Now, one quorum is going to be higher than this price in England, right? But it's lower than this price, the sweater's price in Portugal. So it's somewhere in between, right? Now, let's see how we could find the gains from trade. Okay. Now, we said that England has a comparative advantage in sweater production. So they want to produce more sweater, right, once they start trading with each other. Now, here, with trade, we find that one sweater can exchange one corn, right? So that's how much the English sweater producer can get, one corn, right? But before this, without trade, they can only exchange 1/3 corn. So it's 1/3 corn, right? So we find that the gains from trade is going to be 2/3 of corn. All right. In other words, we could say that the corns becomes less expensive in England, right? Or you could say with each sweater English people produce, they can exchange more corns with free trade. Okay, so they can get more. Of course, that's the gains from trade. Okay, for Portugal, we could do the same thing. Okay, because it has a comparative advantage in corn, so they want to produce more corns, right? And once they get more corns, they want to trade it. They want to export the corns to England. Now, without trade, when they have to sell the corn to their own people, okay, other people living in Portugal, we find that the price of each corn is, so you have to go back here in table 2 and find that corn price. It's 2/3 sweater, right? By giving up each corn, they can get 2/3 units of sweater. But with the trade, they will be able to get one sweater. So let's put that before this. Okay. All right. And so the gains from trade would be 1/3 sweater. Okay. Again, in this case, you would find that sweater in Portugal becomes cheaper. Okay, or by giving up each corn they produce, they can get more sweaters. They can exchange more sweaters. Okay, and here we already demonstrated that free trade can benefit both countries. Okay, especially Portugal, because previously we believe it does not have any absolute advantage between the two goods, so it should get hurt. England should make a lot of money from Portugal, but again, if we put money aside, look at the real economy, we actually find Portugal can benefit from trade. Okay, because by focusing more on corn production, it can exchange more sweaters. All right, so part C here, you can find that it's pretty easy to answer these questions, right? The comparative advantage in which good we already answered. If England and Portugal decides to trade, which commodity will Portugal trade to England? Again, here, as you can see, because Portugal has comparative advantage in corn production, it produces more corns, so it will export corns to England. Okay, and in return, they're going to import more sweaters from England. All right, so this is table 3 in part C. Okay, and here we show you the gains from trade from the price difference. Okay, before and after trade. Now, in next video, we're going to look at question number 2. We use a different way to show you gains from trade.